This recording I'm going to look at auto-loading, which is a way of loading your PHP classes without having to write a load of require statements and think about requiring and including files all in the right order. So I think you're going to really enjoy it. Before we get into that, let me just say that I record in high resolution, so you don't need to watch on a blurry screen. Choose high definition if that works for you. Would you like to join a growing group of PHP developers and take your skills to a new level? If that sounds like you, all you need to do is subscribe and click the little notification icon, and welcome. I'm going to start by creating a couple of classes, and I'm going to put them in specific folders and give them specific namespaces which match their folder location. So you'll see what I mean. So in the chapter 4 folder, I've created an app folder. Inside of that, I've created a utility folder and a connection folder, and now I'm going to put a class in each of those folders. So in the connection folder, I'm putting a class called MySQL Connection, and I'm going to put the namespace here, and notice how it matches exactly the folder structure, app connection. Very important, and you'll see why shortly. As you can see at the top of the class, that namespace has been added. So if I hadn't done that in the setup of the class, I could have just come and done it in the file anyway. This file is going to have one property which can be set through the constructor, and as we've moved on to PHP 8 now, I'll show you something else which is cool and new. So typically, or previously I should say, when we've created classes, we've had to go through this whole process of first declaring the property, then passing in the parameter, and then assigning the value of that parameter to the property. But now in PHP 8 you can do that all in one go. So check this out. All I need to do is put a public visibility declaration before the parameter, and in that one line I'm now declaring the property, adding the parameter and assigning a value. Is that cool? I admit it has nothing to do with auto-loading, but we might as well start using new features. If you're still on PHP 7, don't worry, you can still do it the same way as what you've done up to now. That's not a problem. Okay, let's move on. So I'm going to create this second class. This is going in the app utility folder. Notice the namespace is also app utility, and also notice that the class name matches the file name, i.e. random utility class. randomutility_class.php is the file name. I'm giving it one property, which is a status, and I'm setting it a default of working. I should point out that it's not great practice to put the word class on the end of your class names. I'm just doing that as part of a demonstration. Okay, so now we need a file where we can go and practice our auto-loading. I've created a public folder in the chapter 4 folder. Inside of that, I've created just a normal PHP file called index.php. This is quite a common setup you'll see in like modern frameworks like Symfony and Laravel, where there's only one point of entry and it's referred to as a front controller, and it's typically an index file which you'll find in a folder called public or web. Okay, up until now, if we've wanted to load classes into our files, we've had to do this. We've had to write a require statement for each class file that we're going to require. But what if we had like 20 different classes that this file is going to use? You know, the list would be huge. Also, you need to make sure that you're requiring things in the right order if certain classes rely on others. It's cumbersome, and auto-loading solves the problem of this. And the way we do it these days is with this SPL autoload register. SPL stands for Standard PHP Library. Don't worry about that for now. We'll be covering loads of stuff from there as the course moves on. As you can see, the function takes a callback as its first and main argument. This is a callable which can be passed in a couple of different ways. I can do it inline like this, which is actually the way we're going to do it. I can also do it by passing a string with a function name if the function is in the same file. And I can also pass an array with a class name string and a function name string. But like I say, we're going to stick with the original one which I showed you, which is to inline it. The way it works is this. The class name, including namespaces, gets passed in as an argument to the callback. We can then take that value, and then implementing whatever logic we want, we can use it to locate the correct file for that class. And so what I'm going to do is follow a similar convention to what is used in frameworks like Symfony and Laravel. Because my namespaces match my folder structure, it makes this very easy. So the root directory is the chapter 4 directory because everything is sitting inside there. So first of all, I grab that root directory, I append a / on that, and then I append that to the class name. But what I'm going to do is replace the backward slashes, which is used for namespaces. I'm going to replace those backward slashes with forward slashes, and then that way it's giving me the folder structure, or rather I'm converting it to the path of the file, and I just need to append .php on the end of that, and that will find my files. After that, I just want to return the file from the function, so I'll do a check to see if the file exists. I can do that using the built-in file exists method. If it does exist, I'm just going to require that file. I'm not actually going to handle what happens if it doesn't exist. I know that's a bit happy path, but we're going to do that stuff in more detail when we come on to exceptions and error handling using object-oriented PHP. For the time being, I'm just going to new up the two classes, and what I'll do is I'll go and echo out those strings which we set as properties on them. So MySQL connection equals new MySQL connection, and utility equals new app utility random utility class. Down in HTML, I'm going to echo out MySQL connection database URL, and I'm also going to echo out utility and status. Now I need to point my server at the right location in order to find this little mini application. So I'm going to move into my public folder, and I'm using PHP's built-in server. You use whatever works for you. And if I start my server up in this folder, then that's where the server will look for files. And I'm using index, which is the default. And so I should be able to just go to this. And there you go. There's our two strings, MySQL DB URL, and status is working. So that's great. If you've been coding along with me, it means you've just auto-loaded your first classes. That's a big step. We don't need to keep it in this file though. We can go and put it in its own autoload file, which again is also quite a common convention. So inside of the public directory, I'll create a file called autoload PHP, and I'll just paste everything into there. And that's all we need to do. Well, it's not all we need to do. We also need to include it. So I'll include autoload.php in my index file. When you move stuff around, always check that it still works and that you've not broken anything. So I refresh that, still working. So this is great. Now we can go and shorten these lines here by using use statements at the top of the file. So it's saying simplify FQN. FQN means fully qualified name. Again, we'll go and check to see everything is still working. Should do. So far so good. Now here's a question. We're including autoload in this file, so does that mean that will just work for the classes in this file? How about if I wanted to load classes into those files? Let's see what happens when I try and do that. So I'm going to add a public function to the MySQL connection, and I'm going to call it getDatabaseURL, which will return a string. And what I'm going to do is get that database URL from another connection which we created in the previous lesson on namespaces. If you haven't watched that one, go check it out. Basically, I created this class here, database MySQL connection, and that also had a method called getDatabaseURL, which returned a database URL string. So fairly unrealistic maybe, but just to demonstrate this, as you see at the top here, I have my use statement, but you'll notice I'm not having any require statements or include, which is something that I definitely would have needed doing it the previous way. Just need to change this database URL property access to the getDatabaseURL method. Let's go and check it out. Refresh, and there you go, it's working. Brilliant. Just take a second to think about how much better that is and how much work it's going to save you rather than having to require files inside of all your other files. Like I say, it's what the modern frameworks use, such as Symfony and Laravel, and the example that I've just shown you there is very similar to the convention that they follow. I hope you found this one useful and that you've enjoyed it. Be sure to give it a like if so, and don't hesitate to share if you want to help out other developers like yourselves. I'm sure they'll find this useful, and it's what good developers do. Also, if you want to see more of my stuff, all you need to do is subscribe and click the little notification icon. I release new recordings at least 2 times a week. Details of my schedule can be found on the discussion tab of my YouTube channel homepage.